Hello and welcome to Community Bookstore's virtual event series. I'm Stephanie Valdez, co-owner of the bookstore. Community Bookstore will be celebrating 50 years in business this fall, and we credit the support of readers and writers for this milestone. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Tonight, Suzanne Cope joins us to present her new book, Power Hungry: Women of the Black Panther Party and Freedom Summer, and their fight to feed a movement, in conversation with one of the book's subjects, Cleo Silvers. This event is co-presented with our friends at Pilsen Community Books in Chicago. Now for some housekeeping. You should be able to see and hear our presenters, but they cannot see or hear you. If you'd like an audio transcription, you can turn that on at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, please click on the Q&A button here at the bottom of the screen to submit them. We'll ask some of those at the end of the program. Let me tell you a bit more about tonight's guests and we'll get started. Suzanne Cope is a writing professor at NYU who has been researching and writing about food and politics for years. Her articles have been published in the New York Times, Washington Post, Atlantic, and Travel and Leisure, as well as with the BBC, CNN, Buzzfeed, NPR, and more. She speaks on related topics on radio shows and podcasts and at numerous professional and scholarly meetings. Cope lives in Brooklyn, New York. Raised in Philadelphia, Cleo Silvers began her career in community and labor organizing as a VISTA volunteer and activist in the South Bronx. She was a member of the Black Panther Party, later the Young Lords Party. She was recruited by James Forman and the Central Committee into the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, DRUM, etc., which became the Black Workers Congress, BWC. She began her work with the BWC on a labor organizing introduction tour of the United States, and organized in most of the major working class cities in the country. Today, she is working as a consultant at Cossitt Library in Memphis, Tennessee. Now I'll turn things over to you, Suzanne and Cleo.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like just knowing the conversations Cleo and I were having in the warm-up that this is going to be maybe a little atypical for a book event, but I can only speak for myself. I'm really excited to be here and be talking with Cleo. So I think Cleo was going to ask me the first question.
I am. I want to say good evening to everybody and thank you so much for spending the evening with us. I do have the first issue that I wanted to raise with Suzanne. And and I'm so sorry I can't see everybody. I wanted to see you as much as you wanted to see me. It gives me the ability to know who I'm talking to. So next time we're going to do it the other way around, I hope. So Suzanne, this is my question. How in the world did you find me to even begin this journey that we're walking right now?
I was thinking about this the other day because I did have one in-person event with mostly students, and someone asked me this question of how I found you and decided I wanted to help tell your story. And I can't remember exactly how I homed in on you, but I know I was looking for I guess we're calling it the research silences. I enough research to understand that there were a lot of women doing really amazing things with the Black Panther Party, especially around the Free Breakfast for Children's program and giving away food and clothing and housing. And I know, I didn't know this at the time, but I know that you did a lot with healthcare. And your name came up in these different places. And so I just thought, here is a name that I hadn't heard in these, in the books always mentioned, the handful of women always mentioned, and here's a name that isn't always mentioned, but is someone I could at least try to reach out to and see if I could get more information. And then I remember so distinctly, we had messaged a little bit, and then I remember it was fall and I was in my office at my new job, and we ended up making a phone date and we talked for a while, and I was just so relieved and so excited because you were just so warm and generous with your stories and just obviously easy to talk to. And so that was, I guess, the beginning of it all.
Well, thank you very much. That's really a wonderful explanation, and I accept it. It's accepted. Now you got a question for me?
Well, I know that I was so I mean it was strange and interesting to be asking you if this total stranger could come and stay in your town and talk to you for a couple days, but you were so generous to be willing to do that. And then once we met, I got to know you so much better and I understood this is so much a part of your nature. But what were you thinking? Did it go how you thought it was going to go when I first came out to see you? Which I will note for everyone, it was January of 2020, early January, and I feel so incredibly lucky now that I was able to make a trip to meet you before all the things happened. But yeah, what did you think of that trip?
Well, I thought it was a wonderful experience, to tell you the truth. I hadn't had anybody to talk to here in Memphis. Memphis is different than New York. It's more difficult to make friends. And especially in New York, if people smell food cooking, they're going to knock on your door and ask you what you're cooking, if they can have some. And in Memphis, people don't usually speak to each other. So it was a wonderful to have somebody come and cook and be interested in the food and interested in, all the things that go along with me and the food and the revolutionary struggle, because that's where we're going. And I'm more than and happy with the way in which you've described the struggle, beginning with chattel slavery right on up to today. So I think it's a brilliant look at the history of struggle of the African American people in the United States. So yes, thank you for
Thank
that.
thank you. That means a lot to me. Um it's hard to come in and ask people to say, may I help tell your stories? And I really came to it from a place. I always with everyone I interviewed, but of course I spent the most time chatting with you. But I always said that I came in with a goal to amplify other people's stories, and that was always my goal. Of course, I'm still, always worried that I'm not getting everything right. But so having your stamp of approval means so much to me. Here's something we've never discussed, because we didn't talk much about it. I was too much talking about you. But now that you've read the book, what do you think about Mrs. Quinn's story, about Aileen Quinn's story?
I am so amazed and so proud that you added me into the story about Mrs. Quinn, Mother Quinn, um, because it's such an honor to be placed with a woman of her character, her leadership, her style, uh, and her food. Uh, and her ability, her go forward ability. I'm like down with that a lot, and I really appreciate being placed on the same bill as my sister, and I consider her to be a sister.
For
So
sure. Yeah, I wish it's interesting the way that I was able to, I mean, obviously we got to talk, we got to spend time together, cook together. And then with Aline, I was going by other people's recollections. For those who haven't read the book yet, which probably most of you since it just came out, she died decades ago. And so and she had one kind of oral history where she was interviewed in a video I was able to watch, but that was the only video I was able to see of her, and she didn't ever give one definitive account of her life's work. So I was really, interviewing people who had different perspectives and snippets. So I know I was getting a different version of her through these stories, and again, it was these silences. Then of course you're able to speak for yourself.
thank you,
And
thank
so
you.
we were able to have a different version of the story. But I know these stories were just a couple years apart, but I knew that there were obviously many themes that that they had in common, but then the way that they kind of ultimately intersect, I thought was pretty interesting. Did you, I wonder what you think about how about the story around Black Power and how that led to the Panthers. Do you, I don't think we ever talked about that, or if we did, it was very brief.
Well, I think it's clear that there was a divergence in the Black liberation movement between the nonviolent approach, which was essentially they let them beat you up, and you keep making the demands that you require in order to have equality and justice in the society. And then the intervening Robert F. Williams and further Malcolm X and the Revolutionary Action Movement and Malcolm X, where the men and women who were in those discussions started to say, we will not accept being beaten anymore in order to make our demands. And we are now going to, under the leadership of Stokely Carmichael as one of the major leaders, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, then Rat Brown, and people saying we are not going to accept this, and we are not going to not only accept it for ourselves as people fighting for civil rights, but we will not accept it for our community. In other words, we're not asking you, we're telling you you're going to stop engaging in police brutality and murder of our people. And one of the, and as well as other issues that spoke directly to the disparities and the injustice in financial injustices and political and social injustices in the society, which were reflected in the 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party. So, yes, and I was a part of that younger group of people that was like, oh no, I'm going with the people. We're not getting beaten up anymore. We're going to fight back. We will fight back with our programming, and we will not be intimidated by your violence.
You know, there was a story that I had to take out, or else the larger context of it would have just, you know, made the book grow, of a SNCC, a group that was with SNCC during and a RAM group that was with SNCC during Freedom Summer, and there was tension brewing at that time. But you know, I thought that was so interesting, the work by Dr. Emoja. There's a book, We Will Shoot Back, that was about the lesser known story of the armed locals who really were responsible for keeping so many of the activists during Freedom Summer safe. And
Yes.
they've been given such little due, you know, in the larger history. So do you think that SNCC being nonviolent and, you know, the way that they had to, the way that they had their activism, the way that they worked, especially during that summer, do you think they had to exist in that way in order to get us to groups like the Black Panther Party?
That's a really good question. I believe that the major thought process at that time was that in order, which was led by Dr. King and so many other civil rights leaders, was that the only way to get here is to prove that we will not hurt you. All we want is our rights. All we want is to be recognized as humans, and we want our human rights, if you will. And we have to accept your violence toward us as a part of that process. And the divergence was when the younger people was like, no, we don't believe it. We don't believe that we need to accept this beatings and carnage. which is essentially what was going on during the civil rights movement, and that we need to, we want to fight back. We want to defend ourselves, not necessarily fight back, because I think that wasn't where we were at that time. We just want to defend ourselves. So if you come at us, just like the Black Panther, if you corner the Black Panther, he's going to go forward. He's going to fight you back. He's not going to. There's no way to back up. So that was the view from the thought process of the Black Panther Party, that we want to defend. We will defend ourselves, and we will not allow you to. We will walk around the streets and let you know that we are watching you, and that you can't just beat people with no consequences whatsoever. We have to stop that from occurring. So it never was an aggressive thing, from the point of view of the Black Panther, but certainly we were not, we were young people, and it was time to make a change.
It's always framed so much in so much of this, section of this book, parts of the book are talking about the propaganda, the way that this story was so manipulated by the press, of course, influenced greatly by FBI, by law enforcement, but there's such a focus on defending yourselves and violence or nonviolence, when of course, so incredibly often it was the white supremacists creating, inflicting this violence. But what this resonates with me, because just today I was telling you right before we got on that I was doing some research around another sit-in in 1965, and I was talking to an activist who is also a scholar, and a scholar around food and activism, and both of them just got to the point that, and this is what is making me think about, it's just about human dignity and connecting on this human level and humanity, that and that's what you're saying. People are saying, look, I am a person who there is no reason to inflict violence against me, but then there's all these other ways, the survival programs, that are also just saying, I'm a person who needs to be fed, I'm a person who should have shelter over my head. So much of it was about just seeing the humanity in each other and doing for each other what can be done and should be done. And I'm wondering, do you have thoughts about particularly around food and how that is connected to helping each other see the humanity?
Absolutely. I did want to say that one of my comrades, Juan Gonzalez, always says that not having enough to eat, not having access to quality health care where you can expect to live a decent life, not having a decent housing, not having enough money to feed your family. All of those things are forms of slow violence, slow attacking, and finally murder, finally death. And I want to give him his props for saying that, and he opened my eyes to the violence that is a result of treating people so badly and refusing to share the resources of the society with people, which could very easily, the resources are there and could so very easily be shared so that no one is homeless or hungry or without a quality education or without a car, for that matter.
No, it's so
transportation being one of those things too. And everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. And I think that is another thing at the core of this whole discussion and this whole struggle, is dignity and respect and recognition for your contributions. All of that is so important. And that working people always have made the country run, and the slaves in that way made things run when it was a system of slavery, and the same with working people. That's the whole ball of wax, if you will. Um,
Exactly. It was someone said today who I was talking with, this is an obvious truism that, it's always, food has so often been used as a tool of oppression for those who are the powerful are striving to marginalize. And I think of so many instances, both that I wrote about in the book, that you and I have talked about, that that you just alluded to. The one story is the story of the Greenville food blockade, of how this all-white local government just decided to forego government food assistance, to purposely punish mostly Black activists who were striving to register to vote and to be able to practice their voting rights. And yeah, just to look at the cruelty of that, of purposely blocking food aid, that it in no way affects them, other than it is only feeding people who are hungry. And obviously you have seen that so many times, working with was it United Bronx Parents,
yes.
where the children in the Bronx were just getting such worse food, getting the cast-offs of the New York City school district, and how the parents came together, and the Black Panthers, certainly helped with that, to fight back and say, no, this is not what our children deserve. Why are we getting such worse quality food than other children in other departments or other parts of the city? So yeah, it's very clearly being used to marginalize, for sure.
Ooh, we have a Q&A.
Should we just go to questions? And do you want to add? Can you see it, Cleo?
Yes, I have seen it, and oh my goodness, there's been so many wonderful dinners. I'm I'm the queen of dinner parties. I love dinner parties, whether it was when I was in VISTA, I had dinner parties, and in my little tiny VISTA apartment. And when I was in the Black Panther Party, the leadership of the New York branch used to come around for quote unquote political education, but most of them made their way through because they knew some interesting dish was going to be served, like lobster Newburgh. That was a really good one. That was one I did several times when the Panther leadership came over. Coq au vin. That was another really good one. And I must say that I learned about coq au vin because I used to go around with the priest in the neighborhood, and Father Gigante happened to be one of the priests that hung around with my fiance, who would later become my husband. And they used to take us to these really great Italian restaurants all around town. VISTA Volunteers, let's show them the town, that kind of thing. And one night I ordered this coq au vin, and I fell in love. So I learned how to make it, and I learned all the techniques that were connected with making it really like from scratch. And I think that was probably my favorite. But I want to say that my favorite meals, which included always a great protein, a great super greens, probably a salad, probably champagne. That's another thing. Everybody knows that about me. With a good dinner party, you got to have champagne or Prosecco or something bubbly and light that goes with it. But what's more important than anything is the conversation, the discussion, the sharing of, sharing food, but sharing ideas and arguing over differences and which direction we ought to go in. And how do we change the society? How do we make it into a better place for everybody? Because I think that's what everybody wants. I hope that's what everybody wants. And if so, then how can we, in an organized fashion, bring about that change so that it's a good place? It's a place of quote unquote love. When you really get right down to it, it's a place of love where people are allowed to love each other because we're not fighting over the meager resources. If we're not fighting each other, then we're learning each other's culture, we're loving each other's food, and we're dancing together, and building and making music. It's a wonderful thing, and I keep telling people in the South, you have a real problem because you're not really mixing with people and sharing all of our wonderful culture. And it's so fun. We are such fun people. You're missing it.
Well, it was the community that was so feared by those in power, right? It was that
Yes.
that sense of, well, if different people got together and saw how much they had in common and how much they both wanted the same thing and enjoyed each other's food and enjoyed each other's company, then they would be a formidable force against those in power. And it seems so simplistic, but it also in some ways is so simple that it is around food that makes that connection happen.
Which is why we have to fight for good food. Please, people, don't let Monsanto have all of the seeds. I mean, we want to get right down to it. This is very important for us to have food that is recognizable as something that is nutritious for the body of our progeny. That's right. Because we want all workers to have good food, nutritious food. I don't know what you said, Ron.
Do you have a little devil, or is it an angel on your shoulder, Cleo?
Yeah, there's one on each shoulder. I never know which way to look.
No, it's so true. And that also reminds me of the stories you were telling me about how you bring your Black and brown cadre around to these different restaurants. I was in Harlem recently taking my NYU students on a tour. I wasn't leading the tour. I was another scholar, Scott Barton, who is a great food studies scholar. And actually, Cleo, you two should meet. He's fantastic. And so he was giving us a tour, and it was really wonderful. That was when I stopped by what was the Harlem headquarters and is now a bodega.
Yes.
And
sadly,
I can't believe it. But I was trying to imagine these restaurants that you were telling me about, that wonderful Indian place. And, so many, of course, restaurants have been lost in New York. Many are still there, but just, looking at so much that Harlem had to offer. I know you were also in the Bronx as well, but, and just imagining you bringing these young kids around, these teenagers around, and sitting them down for this nice meal that they might, never have had. Cause I know I grew up in a small town, and I didn't have Indian food till I went to college. I didn't have sushi till I went to college. I didn't have Thai food till I went to college. There were so many there's so many parts of the world that I just, didn't know about.
We don't have access to enough time. I want to say that I want to have more Q&A as much as possible. I want to say hi to people. So can we open it up now? Or did you have another question you wanted?
Oh, that sounds great.
Okay.
We have another question. what was the most surprising or unexpected thing you discovered through your research and writing of this book?
Go ahead.
I think that something that was surprising and unexpected was that I knew these two stories had so many thematic connections, but the ways that they ended up ultimately connecting were very surprising. The fact that Father Earl Neal, who helped, was one of the, the non-Panther founders of the free breakfast program in Oakland, that he was in, he stayed at Ellen Quinn's house. And even though, of course, Cleo and Eileen didn't meet, there were so many connections like that where it just seems, I mean, it seems so obvious since we're talking now about how one story did lead so logically to the other. But the fact that there were so many people who were present in both places, I thought was so wonderfully surprising. And it just, I think, reinforced that these stories made sense to be together. I thought it made sense to me, and my team of folks, like my wonderful agent and editor, they saw the vision. But when these stories really did come together, it was pretty magical. And I thought, yes, this story in this way has not been connected before on the page, and I was really excited about them.
I hope that a lot of people get to read this story, because both stories are so important and so directly connected to the movement and how it progressed and went forward. And I just want people to get to know Miss Aileen, because she's a cool lady. She's very cool.
Yeah, wouldn't she be amazing to sit down and have dinner with?
Oh man.
It would be fantastic, and get to know you, Cleo. But what's wonderful is they're getting to know you right now. No, we would love questions from folks and if it's aimed at me or Cleo, or if you want to know what we both have to say, then certainly you can mention that as well. So Cleo, I also wanted to highlight, in some ways, I feel I short shrifted you because I only talked about your healthcare work a tiny bit in the book. And I know that's so much of what you focused so much of your time on. And I'm glad that story is being told elsewhere, like in the recent documentary Takeover, which is wonderful. Folks can find on New York Times documentary op-ed streaming page. And that's really great. And that's where I first encountered your name, was that you've been interviewed a couple of times in various places for that. But you've said to me, and I would love for you to share with others, if you don't mind, how you see food security and also good food and culturally appropriate food being tied into healthcare.
Okay. So everybody probably is not fully aware that the original determination that we needed a free breakfast program by the Black Panther Party was because of healthcare issues, because of nutrition. And what was happening was that the medical people who were working with us were showing us how the children could not compete on a level playing field if they did not have a good breakfast. And that having that would make a good nutritional, I mean, everybody knows breakfast is the best meal of the day, that whole thing. And there were a lot of kids who didn't get the best meal of the day, so that they wouldn't be able to learn, and all this nutrition is actually a health issue. So that it became more than just, well, we need to feed the kids because they're hungry, but they're hungry, and that means that they are not nutritionally taken care of. And that was the major point. I think that we miss the whole question of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness being health. And if that we are told that this is our birthright, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you will, then those are things that we should believe are available to us, should be available to us. If they're saying that we have this, as just as healthcare should be something that is available to us, as well, and nutrition as a part of healthcare, as a matter of fact. So yes, the question of healthcare is a key element to making sure that people can survive and can make a contribution to the society through their labor, through their work. So yeah, I can't get my two Q&As down here. Is there a reason?
Oh, I don't know if it's because I have it open. I'll read it because your answer ties so nicely into this next question, which is for both of us.
Okay.
And I'll read it out loud. For both of you, can you identify where food and power are intersecting most critically now? Where do we need to go from here? And my thinking around this and connecting with what's in the book and what you're saying really is that idea of food as power, and it's been wielded against the people, talking about like those local governments that were so, pointedly um, keeping food away from people. And there's other stories as well around intimidating people during Freedom Summer so that they wouldn't eat together, so that they wouldn't feel comfortable eating and feeling like they could have a restful meal, they could have community. Of course, with the Black Panther Party,
Oh, a lot of food.
food was considered so powerful that Hoover wrote a memo that it was the biggest threat, not the Black Panther parties, but the Black Panther Party's free breakfast for children program was the biggest threat, basically against his
To the internal security of the United States.
and it was
How can the free breakfast program be a threat to the internal security? That's silly.
because
That's
food
J. Edgar Hoover
is
silly.
powerful to empower the people, to feed the people, to keep them healthy, to keep them full, to keep them learning was that dangerous to him, to the power structure. So I'll answer this first. Oh, yeah. Did you have something to say about that?
I just want to say something about the supply chain issues. They were asking about what we have today. And the other thing is, I want to suggest that we have dinner parties. Please, let's start having dinner parties again where we're sharing information. Even if we don't agree with each other, let's sit down, let's eat, let's talk, let's have a little drink. We'll do it. We'll be able to build some healthy relationships that don't necessarily have to agree immediately. So I'm sorry, I just ran right into what you were going to say.
No, I so agree. Yeah, the power of sitting down together and conversing and planning. But food, yeah, where food and power is intersecting right now. I know that Cleo is acting in these spaces. I've been researching over the last number of years. I think the I Collective, which is an indigenous group of food activists, is doing really, really wonderful things right now. And they are just, in fact, I wrote an academic paper comparing them to the Black Panthers. It just came out in a book shortly ago. I haven't shared that with you yet, Cleo, but I will. And where I really see what they're doing, because the Panthers were so explicitly talking about at the breakfast program, they were teaching children why the Panthers were serving them breakfast because of the systemic reasons that they were not getting food elsewhere. They were teaching them about how to regain their power, about the untaught history of Black and Brown people, and so it did become this very explicitly powerful and political space around food, getting people together, eating food, and eating food that was honoring them and saying this is food of your culture, but this is also what you're worthy of. And I see the I Collective in particular right now, and there's other groups doing it as well, but I always love to highlight them because I see them really doing this kind of work as well, where a couple years ago now, but I know they do these other events around the country and around North America, is they'll have a dinner that's raising money for a specific indigenous cause, and at the same time, while you're eating pre-colonial food, they will talk about, they'll give you a political education at the same time, and it's really powerful. And so I suggest folks find them and follow them. But that's just one group of many. Cleo, who do you think is um, is working in this space right now, or what kind of activism do you see happening that you're excited about?
Well, I'm still down with the community gardens all over New York area. And I have to place my my support there in terms of the expanding of the space that we have to garden and share healthy food with the rest of the community, so that it's not just the little group, little club's garden, but it's everybody's garden. It's the community's gardens. And I think that the ones that are now in existence that have gone through all the battle to stay alive should now be the mentors for other people, and should be paid mentors for other people who want to build community gardens. I think that's so important. And no one has asked us about the Black Power cookbook yet. And when it'll be out. I'm just kidding you. I'm teasing.
I was told not to reduce the story to recipes.
Oh, okay.
We could just come up with our own cookbook, Cleo.
Recipe and stories and recipes together.
There's been some actually really amazing books that have come out recently. I don't have their titles at the tip of my tongue, but I could look them up really quickly, around Black food stories that are also recipes. Stories is power. And also I believe it's called The Gathering Basket. The same I Collective group is just put out a cookbook as well, but a powerful one. It's really great. And I will totally second and third everything you say about community gardens. I've been a member of a number of them in my time in New York, and we visited one on this tour of Harlem. And I know that the gardens in my neighborhood are doing explicitly anti-racist work. And I know many other gardens in New York are doing the same. And I think that's so important to honor the neighborhood, honor the elders, honor the land, and
Yes.
and I think that's where a lot of really great work is happening. So to support those groups, I think, is really, really important. We have another related question here. Do you have any words of wisdom for people looking to begin participating in and organizing mutual aid and community service? And before I hand it to you, Cleo, I want to say that it's been so interesting over the course of writing this book, because of course these terms are incredibly familiar to you and have been your entire career, but these are terms I think are only now and since the pandemic really becoming more familiar to more people. And I remember asking you, saying, wait, community organizing is a field. It's like it's a field of study. It's a concept. And that was early in my research, and that formed, then suddenly so many things made sense of, that really is, in a lot of ways, there's formalized ways of talking about community organizing. And what was happening with SNCC, what was happening with Black Panthers was incredibly organized. And then also this idea of mutual aid is not charity. It is the community supporting each other. And that is part of what makes it so incredibly powerful and useful, is that it's not someone coming in saying, here's what I will decide to give you. It is the community saying, I understand what we need and I'm going to provide it. But anyway, I'll I would just wanted to frame that. What do you have to say about words of wisdom for people looking
Yes.
to begin participating?
Well, I don't know so much that these are words of wisdom, but I can tell you that the direct eye-to-eye human contact between yourself and the people that you're working with is key, so key, and spending time together in the room together. Now, I know we're just getting over this pandemic thing, but this is now our time to get together in the same room, eye to eye, and work with each other on whatever the programming is. You have so many programs, there's so many things that are needed today on a day-to-day basis. There's food banks, there are, gardens, there are all kinds of ways to feed people. There's the food is available from the government, available everywhere. It's just getting the food to the people who need it. And, community organizing, that means going door to door. Even though we have all this amazing technology, it still means going door to door and asking people what's going on in their homes so they can share with you and tell you what their needs are. Preventive medicine outreach, so important, door to door. When you knock on the door and you say, does anybody, well, number one, can we test you for preventable disease and come back and give you your results? And then is there anybody here who needs to see a doctor, and a doctor is available to either see you, treat you, or refer you? And those are the things that, we have to do this stuff with each other. We have to do it for each other and for the next generations of people that are coming forward. And we have to share the resources no matter what. Have to share the resources. It's not that difficult. Everybody has a little more of something than the next guy. And whatever that is, that's, just to share it. Because it allows people to feel a connection to each other that we wouldn't feel otherwise. The giver feels a connection, and the person who receives also feels an important connection. So it's not a one-way deal when you're giving something. Believe me, you're gonna get something in return for it.
And that's really the concept of mutual aid. And I think that's so important to remember and consider. I know that in my research, what you were saying, what the Black Panthers were doing was seeped in how SNCC was formed. And I remember speaking with someone very early on, with Curtis Muhammad, and he said, Ella Baker, who was, an early leader from the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, founded SNCC, very revered, one of the few women in official leadership roles. She said exactly what you're saying, Cleo, too. This is what she taught. She was saying, you need to go in there and you need to talk to the people. Do not assume that you know what they need, and you need to ask them, how can we help you? You've said the exact same words to me too, Cleo, and talking about how the Panthers were working. And I spoke with Curtis Muhammad early on in my research, and he was so wonderful and generous with his stories. But he grew up outside of Macomb and was in Macomb as a teenager, an early activist. He's still doing activism work, and he told me how there were so many eager young people who just wanted to go in and say, I'm going to go in and help. And Ella Baker was like, you need to slow down, and you need to not think that you know what the people need or want. There are so many local people who have been doing work for such a long time, and you need to work with them, work for the people. And I thought that was so profound, the way that he was framing it and talking about how there can be so much. And I see this today of people with so much excitability and eagerness, and they just want to go in and they're like, this is what I'm going to do. And I just
wait
you need
a minute.
and this is what
better check with the people for
This is what my elders taught me and told me. And I thought it was so, yeah, it was just resonant in both of these stories. It was really powerful. And Curtis also told me, um, and this was, like I said, very early in my research, and I met him, I was lucky enough to meet him in person in New Orleans in January 2020. And he said, after Freedom Summer, he was at the SNCC office in Atlanta, and he got a call from the Black Panthers. And they said, we're trying to, figure out, we want to serve the people. And, what did you guys do in Mississippi? And so he said he and some other SNCC workers went out there and gave the Black Panthers a workshop on exactly this. And so I found that was another moment of connection. He's like, he said to me, I'm not going to quote him exactly, but I'm not saying I started the breakfast program, but I am saying that we were talking about how to, ask the people, and that's what the people said. And I thought that was another really amazing connection of people who had been in both of these places doing the same kind of work.
I think there's an organic relationship, in truth, between the generations as we have come up and organized. I want to say that I knew Queen Mother Moore and had been in several meetings with her and talking to her. And she and I had an interesting relationship because she used to say I was always trying to be too cute to learn anything. But I listened very carefully. I sat at her feet many times, and of course, everybody knows I worked with Jim Forman, who also provided that bridge between SNCC and the Black Panther Party and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. And so many people. My first speech, revolutionary speech, was in Maryland when I was a VISTA volunteer, and it was Stokely Carmichael. So there is just definitely a connecting bridge between us,
Sure.
and all of the ancestors, Ruby Dee, as a woman who was in the movement and made all kinds of contributions with her husband. But I mean, Yuri Kochiyama, one of my good friends, I consider that, a good friend to me and Ron. We went out and visited her from New York to Oakland when they moved her out to Oakland. So many people that, you just, you hear about, and of course you couldn't have done the work that you did without coming in contact. Herman Ferguson, just all, I could give you name after name. Muhammad Ahmed, the founder of the Revolutionary Action Movement, one of my great friends who I love, and please, if anybody is interested in finding out a lot about the Black Liberation Movement and helping out a comrade, go see Muhammad Ahmed, formerly Max Stanford, who wrote We Will Meet Again in the Whirlwind. Brilliant members of the previous generation from us, and leaders and sharers of information. Oh, and the Revolutionary Action Movement was the only organization that Malcolm X joined in his lifetime, besides the Fruit of Islam and the Muslims.
I'm gonna do. We're close to out of time. I'm gonna do one last call for questions, and okay. I'm gonna ask you a question, Cleo, while we wait for these last excellent questions. So one important aspect, concept, totally giving full credit to Francois Hamlin, Professor Hamlin, who talked about activist mothering, and I wonder your thoughts on that. So her concept, and she was looking specifically at one woman, Vera Pidgey, during the Freedom Summer, or during, not just Freedom Summer, but throughout the 1960s in Mississippi. And so she was saying that part of the reason that there were so many women leaders, and that was really the goal with this book, and with, trying to amplify the story of women whose stories were just mere footnotes to history at so many times, but whose work was so incredibly important and skilled. And her concept was that because so many of these women were skilled and organizing and using these more feminine skill sets that are not as revered and acknowledged. And she came up with this concept of activist mothering. And so I wonder if you thought she was applying this specifically to, to the women in Mississippi and of the civil rights movement, but I think it very much applies to the women of the Black Panther Party, of which there are 2/3 of the Black Panthers were women, and that fact is so little known, at least 2/3. And if you listen to the deep cuts of people talking about the Black Panther Party, really, so many people whose names you recognize give credit to the women who were organizing the food drives, organizing the breakfast program, doing so much of the office work and the extensive organizing. And so did that concept of activist mothering ring true to you with the women you knew of the Panthers?
As a matter of fact, this is interesting that you raised this question. I do not have any children at all. And one of my love languages is mothering. And as a matter of fact, my cooking, my engagement with helping people has been for me a form of activist mothering. And I think that this is a question, an idea, a concept that we have to engage and expand upon, because I think that there's something behind it. There's something important behind it. And that when we look at how beautifully the women of the Black Panther Party functioned, and by the way, I was a big time babysitter in both the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords, that's one of my big jobs they gave me, was babysitting the kids, and working with the youngest members of the organization. Although I think Janet Cyril and Afeni Shakur did a lot for the youngest recruitees into the Black Panther Party. But what I'm saying is that we do have a concept and some ideas that we need to search, we need to chase down and understand better. And that is the role of women in the revolutionary movement and the movement for change and the working class struggle.
I think that's absolutely the perfect comment to end on.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Community Bookstore. I really appreciate this time.
Thank
and
you,
could somebody tell me who's watching?
You can see
all the
the
people we didn't get to see.
Up in the corner, you can see the attendees list. Cleo, it's wonderful to talk to you as always.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you for this joyful and inspiring conversation. We really appreciate both of you and your work.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, good night, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, folks, for coming.